Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We are watching Season 3, Episode 21, Greatest Hits. This is Charlie's swan song episode where we see the 5 greatest moments of his life in flashback.
We'll also hear a little bit more from Nestor Carbonell, who of course played Richard Alpert.
There is so much to talk about. Let us not waste a moment. Let's do it.
As you know by now, we start every episode of The Hatch with our hot take on the episode we have just watched. Sammy, what is your hot take on Greatest Hits?
So, this has to be my hot take. There's no way around it. Whatever we did to deserve Sayid, it was not enough. The man is a saint.
He is.
I had forgotten that he was completely willing, without question, to sacrifice himself by swimming down into the Looking Glass to save everyone's lives. I mean, he was going to do that without hesitating until Charlie showed up, knowing he was going to die anyway. Yeah. And not only that, Sayid is the only one who really is focused on getting them rescued here, as we see, where he has to, yell at Jack to, slow down and talk to him to get Jack to focus on something besides taking his revenge on the others, which seems to be where Jack's head is at. Right. And Sayid, talks him down, gets him into the right space to realize that they have to do this. And then at the end of the episode, does another big favor for Jack and reminds him, hey, you're the leader. You can't put yourself at risk, involved in this mission here. You need to lead your people to rescue and get them off this island. Let me do the hard, violent part. And he's right on, and he calls Jack out that you're so focused on killing the others that you're not focused on the main objective here, and that's not what a leader would do. He just out and says it, and he's right. And Jack knows he's right and just has to do it because there's no way to argue with that. Yeah. So just go Sayid. I mean, right on all throughout this episode, as always, but especially this episode.
Absolutely. And I do need to walk back my line of the last couple episodes. This is a pretty good plan that Jack has in place. He has generally, thought it out really well. It makes sense. He gets a couple of additional elements from Sayid in terms of, we can shoot the dynamite instead of, when the timeline changes. But yeah, then it seems like he gets so attached to his vision of the plan that he can't compute some of this additional information that's come in and is very fortunate. Yeah, I agree to have Sayid there. And for that matter, Desmond was also willing to sacrifice himself and swim down into the station, and very nearly does. Charlie has to knock him out to keep him from going. I mean, maybe doesn't have to knock him out, but I mean, Desmond,
I think it's a little gratuitous.
is about to dive into this water, and I had forgotten about that.
Yeah, I was really stunned by that. And Charlie, brings up Penny. What about your girl? Don't you want to go back to her? And Desmond says, well, what about your girl? And I don't know. I was pretty stunned because I couldn't imagine Desmond actually making that choice.
No, I mean, so much of Desmond's last season really has been kind of, he has this renewed will to live and this very, very determined will to live, especially once Naomi shows up with this picture of him. It seemed like it came out of the blue that he would give up his life now when Penny might be, 100 miles offshore.
I've got to think what it was is that he was just so moved by Charlie's willing to sacrifice himself that he couldn't help it. I mean, these two guys have become pretty good friends in the extremely short but meaningful time that they've spent together on this island. And
absolutely.
I think that was the inner angel of Desmond coming out.
Yeah.
The inner Jesus. Anyway, I also have a darker theory about Desmond, which I don't really believe, but I'll share that later.
Okay.
Anyway, to come. What is your hot take?
Boy, my hot take is just that this is a phenomenal episode. We have been pretty hard on some of the Charlie episodes in the past.
We have.
Just saying that he doesn't come off as terribly sympathetic all the time. He can be kind of annoying and his plot lines can feel kind of gratuitous. And my God, this just redeems all of it, I think. I mean, the structure of the flashbacks is really, it's straightforward, but I think it's really beautifully done. we see some of Charlie's really good moments. I mean, part of what's been hard about Charlie's backstory is that we've consistently seen him at his lowest. And here we see all of that goodness that I think we all know. And the reason we all kind of love Charlie despite all that is that we really see that he's innately good. And a lot of this just seems to verify that. Especially there's a brief moment that really hit me is when we see that Charlie has left his ring to Aaron. This ring that was given to him by Liam, kind of on the condition that you're the one who's going to carry on the family legacy and you'll leave it to your son someday. And he just sort of dropped it in his crib, and that was like, twisting the knife.
Right, because he's passing that legacy on to Aaron now. Mm-hmm. He feels like Aaron is like his adopted son.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling about this episode, that it feels like this is the rehabilitation of Charlie that was really needed before his death.
Yeah.
And that we haven't... I mean, in a way, I wish, maybe it would be better if this built over time. But this episode just packs such a strong punch that it does the job.
I agree.
Although there were still some moments here that made me frustrated with Charlie. That were the vestiges of the Charlie that I don't like watching. Like,
oh dear.
And I'm sorry, I shouldn't do this when he's sacrificing himself. It's rude, but like, I don't know, the scene where he tells Claire, you have to promise not to worry. Mm-hmm. I didn't like that. Because of course Claire is going to worry about him.
Right.
I mean, obviously she's going to worry, and she should be. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it felt to me like Charlie wanted to feel... This was Charlie, like, hoping to feel less bad about how this was going to affect Claire. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to make himself feel better by thinking, well, she promised me she's not going to worry. Mm-hmm. Even though, of course, she's going to worry. He's going off to do something extremely risky and dangerous. I don't know. It was a little annoying.
Yeah, but I think we also kind of need to recognize here that Charlie is doing... The magnitude of what Charlie's doing here is shocking. I mean, it's really hard to reckon with. Like, he knows he's going to die, and he has decided he is going to die. And, like, with full knowledge of that fact, he's going to sacrifice himself. And reckoning with that must just be impossible. I mean, I can't even fathom it.
That's a reasonable point.
And so I think what he's trying to do with Claire is... Because he also doesn't want to tell anybody that this is what he's going to do. And we see that with Hurley, too. When he basically says, you're too fat to come on the boat. I mean, it's a shitty thing to do, but it's Charlie's way of trying not to let anyone else know what he's about to do. And he's trying to sort of protect people from that. And I think with Claire here, he's trying to protect her from feeling any kind of angst until, of course, there's no alternative. Almost as if he's afraid she's going to talk him out of it, or Hurley too. That's
a very fair response and tempers my frustration significantly.
Oh, good. Oh dear.
No, I mean, truly, this episode is an emotional roller coaster.
Oh yeah.
I mean, through the Charlie flashbacks and through, the moments with his brother and the moment with his father and the moment with Desmond in the canoe and the moment where he, kisses Aaron goodbye and tells him he loves him, and the last kiss with Claire. It's like just moment after moment of like hitting you over the head with how sad this is.
Remember how much you love this character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's effective.
It is.
Well, okay, I have one more rude thing to say. And please forgive me, Charlie fans everywhere, and Rosie, please forgive me. I guess at the end of the day, even with the touching moments between them this episode, I've still never been especially sold on Charlie and Claire as soulmates. I mean, as a couple that is, perhaps going somewhere great if they had more time together, maybe, but knowing that this is the end of their story and knowing that, then they appear in the church together at the end of the show, I feel like so much of the time between them was spent with these kind of, stupid fights that are caused by Charlie doing stupid annoying things, and, Claire's mad at Charlie for various reasons, and, Charlie is, the whole drug storyline and the fire plus water stuff and Charlie and Son. I mean, I don't know, and it feels like only at the very end here do they really like start to reconnect,
Right.
in a special way. And I don't know, I guess there just wasn't that much material on the show of them like being really good together and seeming happy together, and I kind of wish there was more of that, because I think I would buy into them more.
Yeah, I don't think you're entirely wrong. I mean, I think they did have a pretty fraught relationship, and it was
Fraught is
really
a good word.
characterized by we want to do this, but we don't know how, and we just kind of keep fucking it up. Often, I mean, and a lot of their fights were pretty standard, like poor communication, like Charlie, usually various shades of Charlie not telling Claire stuff when he should have just told her. But what's so tragic about that is that, you know, of course, Charlie dies here, and Claire doesn't exactly have much longer either before she's taken in by the Man in Black.
Ooh.
That's kind of it for her, like, self-animated life. You know? Like,
Well, right.
I mean, where she's sort of making independent decisions and pursuing...
Autonomous.
Yeah. Which is so tragic, but that makes it make sense to me that they were sort of soulmates, or, you know, Nestor Carbonell today is going to talk about this concept of soul groups. You know, they were part of this same soul group, and they just kind of didn't get to live it out because they both met, you know, tragic ends so early in the relationship. But, like, I mean, I think you're spot on in that it could have been great, and it could have been something really beautiful if they'd had more time. But in kind of the lost mythology, I think that doesn't mean that they weren't soulmates. Like, they met at this time, and they kind of were able to be there for each other for, you know, a grand total of like 3 months. But had things gone differently, yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And I will just tweak slightly and say Claire does get off the island at the end, so
Right.
hopefully she makes it out of the grasp of the Man in Black and is able to live an autonomous rest of her
Right.
existence. We just don't get
We
to
don't
see
know.
that. Yeah. I mean, it could be the kind of thing that does haunt her for the rest of her life, and kind of a sad thought, but
Yeah. Well, yeah, we
perhaps.
don't really know, like, if she has memories of that time or what, but yeah.
Charlie and Claire, the great couple that never really was, but will be in the afterlife.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is your dark thought about Desmond?
Okay. Gosh, I'm just a downer this week. I love this episode. I've got to say, I should just put that in the middle here. The way this episode, not only the way it tear-jerks us around with Charlie, but the way it builds drama.
Yeah.
And just ratchets up the tension again and again and again, with Carl showing up.
Oh,
And
yeah.
with Jack coming up with making a speech about everything has to happen at the same time, which is really intense.
And really
and-
just gets us ready for the season finale when, of course, nothing is going to go quite...
No, but everything will happen at the same time. However, my dark thought about Desmond is that, so Desmond tells Charlie, I see you drown, and then Claire and Aaron get on a helicopter and get rescued. So Claire and Aaron obviously don't get on a helicopter and get rescued.
Right.
Aaron does. And then Claire ultimately gets on a plane 2 years later and gets off the island. So there's I found myself wondering about this, what's really going on here with Desmond's vision. And there's a great Lostpedia page, actually, if you go look up the theories page for Claire. There's a whole discussion of the different possibilities, which outlines them well. And it's like, okay, so did Desmond really see this vision, and then it just, the future changed?
Right.
Did Desmond see sort of a compilation of things that would eventually happen and kind of, got confused and
Merged
mixed
them
it together?
somehow.
Because they both eventually do get rescued. Is it possible that Desmond made this up and saw himself reuniting with Penny and lied to Charlie about Claire and Aaron getting rescued? I was watching the episode thinking that the latter of those possibilities was unlikely but possible. It didn't seem like Desmond was lying here. He seemed genuine. It didn't seem like the sort of thing he would do, especially after the experience of Catch-22.
Right.
However, and then when he offers to sacrifice himself, I'm thinking, like, oh, okay, like, no, he couldn't have been making this up. Like, he wouldn't be offering to sacrifice himself now if this was just all a plot to make sure that Charlie gets himself sacrificed so that Desmond can reunite with Penny. However, there's still a little part of me that wonders, gee, if Desmond made this all up, and if, he's been lying to Charlie, maybe he's willing to sacrifice himself now because he feels so bad about that and regrets doing it and is trying to make up for it. It's a bad theory. I don't actually believe it.
It's a little convoluted.
Yes.
I was also going to bring up the events of Catch-22 in terms of, I think, we're still kind of ambiguous on what happened in that episode, but what I think, is that Desmond was sort of supposed to let Charlie die at that time, and it might have been Penny in the suit, or because he thought Penny was sort of coming to rescue him, and he chose not to let Charlie die. As far as Claire and Aaron getting on the helicopter, I think that's... I mean, we know, Desmond has told us himself that the picture changes. And
that's true.
What he sees, it's not a prophecy. It's not, he sees sort of a series of events kind of on a specific timeline, and other things could change, so maybe what he sees is Claire getting on the helicopter that takes the Oceanic 6 to safety. And I do not currently remember why Claire doesn't get on the helicopter. They can't find her at the time, right?
She gets taken in by the Man in Black as Christian Shepherd.
Right. So maybe Desmond couldn't have predicted that, or maybe that wasn't, that sort of hadn't been planned yet, or that hadn't, like that seems like kind of a last minute change that Desmond doesn't know about the Man in Black. He doesn't know about that people are seeing sort of apparitions of the dead. Does he? I don't think he does.
No.
So he couldn't, it seems like with what we understand Desmond's visions to be, he couldn't possibly have accounted for that possibility. So maybe. I think what's most likely is that he did envision this, and then things changed.
So maybe a less dark version of my theory, maybe it's possible he also in this vision sees himself reuniting with Penny but doesn't want to share that part because it would make the whole thing seem selfish.
Yeah, but I think Desmond's kind of been seeing that all along. I think many of these visions have had some kind of Penny element, right?
I don't know about that. I think just the one in Catch-22 as far as we're aware. Mm-hmm. We sort of alluded to this earlier with what's going on with Jack and wanting revenge against the others and whatnot. I did find myself thinking again about, and I know I joked about this last week, but they come, they fight, they destroy, they corrupt, it always ends the same. Mm-hmm. The Man in Black's summation of what happens when Jacob brings people to the island. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the conflict between Dharma and the others that ended with the Purge. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking, watching Jack go about his business this episode and making his speech about, we can't run anymore, we can't hide, they're going to keep coming at us, we need to fight back.
Right, we're going to blow them all away.
Yep, blow them all to hell. It's a very powerful speech. It really made me feel like the Man in Black kind of seems like he's onto something here. It's very hard to put two groups of people together on this island and not have them come into violent and ultimately destructive contact.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Purge too, in the context of, here we have Juliet helping another group of people kill all of her people, or many of her people. It's not the same, but it is.
You're comparing her to Ben.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's, it's not the same, but I think there's a pretty obvious parallel there. I don't really know what to do with that. Like, she is fully cognizant of what she's doing. It's not like the plan to sort of blow all of the attackers up is kept secret from her. In fact, it seems like she helps devise it. Obviously, again, like, not unlike Ben, the others have been not, pretty cruel to her. Especially, with some of the other events we've seen in season 3. But she's about to, turn traitor herself.
I like that comparison a lot.
Yeah.
I do. It's, the history keeps repeating itself.
Yeah.
Like, it's really unfortunate, but it does not seem like there's a way around this.
Right. And I think
Hurley runs the island. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what Juliet does here is very, very different from what Alex and Carl are doing. Like, Alex and Carl are just trying to keep people from dying, it seems. Because they feel like, Carl especially kind of owes a debt to Kate and Sawyer, who helped him escape, and wants them to not die. They don't know that, Jack has this plan to sort of kill as many people as possible.
No, that's true. So they are helping with that, even though they don't know it.
Yeah, but
Alex is a hero.
Oh yeah.
I mean, her instinct of going to Carl and saying, they saved your life, you've got to go save theirs. Like, what a pure instinct that she has. She says,
if I get caught, your father's going to kill me this time.
Is he my father?
Yeah, you're right. She knows that her father would not do a thing like this, and that she's got to have some kind of influence that's not coming from Ben here.
Right. Well, and Ben gets pretty scary in this episode. I mean, when he returns to Camp Other without John Locke, and people ask, "Where's John Locke?" and he says, like, "Oh, he didn't." What does he say? He didn't.
He says he had an accident.
Yeah. Okay. An accident being you shot him. But it's, it's so clear of Ben saying, we're going tonight, Jacob wants it to happen now, really just means I want it to happen now because I'm panicking. It's a real Emperor has no clothes moment, and Alex is sort of the first, I think, to take action on that, and to say, like, okay, he's doing something that ought not to be done. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah.
And Richard tries as well when Ben says it has to happen right now. Richard calls him out and is like, no, what are you talking about? Right. Like, are you sure about this? And, I mean, Ben just steamrolls him.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Juliet and Jack and company.
I thought the moment where Jack says, when they're asking Jack to just... allow Charlie to do this thing, and at first Jack won't assent to it. He just wants to focus on the others before Sayid talks some fucking sense into him. But when he says...
There's no reason to do this now. We're going to focus on the others, and then we'll deal with this.
Wait a minute. We have a chance to signal for a rescue.
Look, for 90 days, I've been asked to make decisions for this entire camp. There you go. I just made one.
For better or for worse, this just very much epitomizes Jack's leadership style. I mean, no, nobody actually asked him to make decisions. He started making decisions, which isn't bad. I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. Like, they needed a leader. He took up that mantle and has usually done a pretty good job with it, early scenes in this episode aside. But I just felt Jack saying that, like, this is the job you asked me to do, and I'm doing it and live with it. Like, that's how Jack leads. And, again, for better or for worse.
I'd agree. I would disagree that nobody asked him. I mean, in the second half of season 3, since he's come back, everybody's kind of been like, hey, where are you? Aren't you supposed to be leading us? And Jack has just sort of been like, no.
Okay, fair. I just think this moment, it's like, to Jack, leadership means, I know what's best, and these people need someone to make decisions for them, and that's my job, and I'm doing it, damn it.
Yeah.
And again, he's not necessarily wrong.
Right.
It's just, this is a particular style of leadership, and it's Jack's. Do you have any hindsights?
Oh, gosh. I mean, you already alluded to this line, but Alex drops a really great hint when she says, is he my father? Because I don't recall how much we know at this point. Like, I don't know if we know enough to know that Alex is Rousseau's daughter.
We do. We have the story where Rousseau goes and sees her from a distance.
Right.
Earlier this season.
Right. But of course that, is he my father? Ben is going to, sort of in a very complicated way, deny responsibility for Alex and then take responsibility for her. And then she's going to get killed, in a hostage situation because of it. And that's the thing that sort of leads to Ben's, I think, that's a real breaking point for Ben. And
yeah, I think that's the moment that ultimately allows Ben to sort of repent and rehabilitate himself and become a somewhat better person.
Right, but I think that question and the way it's phrased, "Is he my father?" is kind of a foundational question for Ben that he's going to have to answer here in the coming seasons.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
How
about you?
With that. Just that, like, poor Arst.
Oh.
So many people have handled so much of this Black Rock dynamite on the island now. Like, Rousseau and Jack have been moving around like shit tons of it for days, it seems like. And poor Arst picks up one piece and does it as carefully as possible to avoid getting blown up, and he's the one who gets blown up.
Oh, jeez.
Poor guy.
That's a good take.
Anyway. So, I mean, it's his it's his own fault that he's not a main character.
That's harsh.
No,
now that is rude.
Yes. No. We should go to Nestor Carbonell.
Yes. So if you have missed a few weeks, we have been playing an interview that Sammy did with Nestor Carbonell, who of course brought Richard Alpert to life for us. They met at his home in Los Angeles, and we have a couple more weeks left of this.
So to go back for a minute to the third season and some of the mechanical stuff. So you, as I recall, you were cast on another show, Kane.
Yeah.
After Lost's third season. And please tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but I remember as a fan of the show at the time, and gosh, I probably would have been about 13 or 14 when this was happening. I remember thinking, man, I hope Nestor comes back from Kane, because otherwise we don't get to find out why Richard Alpert is ageless. And then Kane got canceled, right?
Well, first of all, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I was.
We had to know, man.
No, listen, I had to know, and I was dying to get back on the show. I think what happened was that this was flash forward now to this is at the end of season
3, I think. 3 of Lost.
Yes, end of that first season, exactly. So by having done about 5 or 6 episodes, I think at that point, pilot season came around, and I had to sort of. We reached out to the producers on Lost and wondered, hey, is there any chance that you might know where your commitment to this character might lie? Because I'm happy to sort of forego pilot season if there's a chance that I might become a bigger part of the show. And at that point, they didn't. They didn't know to what extent the character would continue on the show, and so we couldn't get any kind of guarantee.
So you felt like you got to go forward with the pilot.
Well, yeah, at that point. So then this pilot presented itself, and it was a great opportunity as well, working with Jimmy Smits, and Cynthia Cedre on the show, and about Latinos, all family, Latino family. But my love still was, my heart was still on Lost, and so I was really split. But the reality hit. I had to provide for the family.
You're a working actor. You got to work.
I have to provide, and working on the hope of coming back on Lost, wasn't going to pay the bills. And so I cut to, I did have to, the kids were in preschool, and I had to pay for that. I had bills to pay, and sure. I was like, at some point, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do the pilot, and let's see what happens. Maybe I could do both. I don't know. And so lo and behold, I did the pilot, and then I got a call from Lost, like, okay, we want you back for the last 5 episodes of the season. And I'd just done a pilot, and I remember thinking, oh my God, this is like, I mean, it's a great problem to have, but I just hope I don't get killed off on Lost. And I do remember coming back on that episode where I did commit that genocide.
Yes. So the genocide was in season 3, but...
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway. Yeah, right. You came back on that right.
Yeah. That was the episode. That was season 3. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I think it was towards the end or something. Yes. It was one of those last 5 episodes. Yeah. And I remember Jack was directing that episode. I remember going to Jack. I go, Jack, please please don't don't kill me off. I don't know if this pilot's going to go. The pilot hadn't. We didn't know. Please don't kill me off. And I go, no. I remember him saying, that pilot's not going. It's not going. I go, well, I don't know if it's going to go or not, but please don't. And sure enough, the pilot got picked up.
Right. Okay, I got it.
And I wasn't killed off on Lost. So I remember going to the TCA for CBS, the Television Critics Association, where we after we shot the pilot and the show was picked up for 13 episodes. I remember getting questions, about am I going to be able to return to Lost? And at that point, I was like, oh my God, how do I answer this? Because I don't know if I am, and yet I would love to do both. In a perfect scenario, I'd love to do both, but I don't know how that's feasible. And I remember saying something silly like, it's up to the higher powers or something. The powers that be. I don't know. Sure enough, the show did not get. We lasted 13 episodes, and I'm so grateful that to do that show, but also incredibly grateful that Damon and Carlton had me back.
Right, because as I recall, it was pretty much right when Lost came back from the writer's strike.
It had,
You were back.
Yeah, in fact, the writer's strike, I think, contributed to the end of Kane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for sure. And, so that sort of put it definitely did. And then, but thankfully they had me back on Lost, and then from there, the role did grow.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about Kane, but as a Lost fan, no complaints.
No, listen, I'm appreciative of every job, but I'm thrilled that the door was open for Lost.
You referenced this at the beginning, but you were watching Lost before you got cast?
I was. My wife watched it religiously, so
Okay.
it was so funny when we got to do that episode, and we got on a van, and sure, William Maypole was there. And
we've talked to William. He's great.
He's awesome. And I'm thinking, and my wife's like, it's Ethan. I was like, settle down. Settle down. So, we were, yes, I was, my wife was a diehard, and I was a fan as well, but, she was mm-hmm. And I quickly became an enormous fan, naturally. But yeah, at the time, I'd watched it. But not as religiously as my wife had watched it.
I just got to tell you, my favorite story that I've heard from any of the cast we've talked to is when Michael Emerson told us that he got onto an airplane once after the show had aired, and someone looked at him and said, "Should I be worried?"
Yes.
Which, it's just kind of horrible that someone would say that, but also hilarious.
Oh, listen, we get that all the time.
Yeah?
I've talked to all the cast. We always have to let everyone know everything's going to be fine. It's all going to be fine.
On airplanes?
On airplanes.
Wow.
I get that all the time, and it's a great thing. It's a very funny thing. It's
Well, Emerson told us that his response is, "You don't have to worry. I wasn't on the flight."
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So I think you could use that as well.
I'm going to borrow that. But I was in a submarine. That's how I got to meet Juliet.
That's
so
true.
Maybe next time I go in a sub.
I guess the reason I asked if you were watching the show is I'm just curious what, you were dropped into this cultural phenomenon, right? And immediately became the object of intense speculation about your character's mysteries and agelessness. What was that like? I'm sure you had people asking you about it. I'm sure everyone wanted you to tell them what was going on.
It was amazing because, as yet another gift as an actor to be in the heat of a mystery, So now I'm the beneficiary of all of that intrigue and mystery, and I'm sort of going along for the ride, not knowing myself any of the answers, which was kind of cool in a way because I didn't know. I didn't know why. I didn't know how or why. So I was discovering, and I couldn't wait to get the next script, to find out. And sure enough, it was all in drips and drabs, and it wasn't until the very end. It wasn't until the episode that my flashback episode, Abaterno, that I knew anything.
Really?
Oh no! It wasn't until I got that gift delivered to me that I was like, oh my gosh, this is the guy.
Do you remember how you reacted when you found out all that information?
Oh, I remember I vaguely remember because I was on the island, meaning Hawaii. I was in Oahu when I got it at that point. And I did remember getting a call from Carlton saying, "Script's coming your way. We love it, and we hope you do. It's a big one. There's a lot, and but I remember the anticipation of receiving and then reading it and just being floored and thinking, oh my God, this is incredible, and it's an enormous undertaking and to do in 8 days.
8 days.
Well, typically
that's the filming schedule.
Most filming schedules are 8 days of shooting, sometimes 8.5. This particular episode, because we had to do horseback riding sequences, I think it ended up being like something closer 12 or 13.
Okay.
So it became a mammoth undertaking on the production side because there was so much period stuff, because there's so much action as well. So I don't know if it wasn't 13 full days, but it was a lot, and it was great. It was at least 10 or 11 full shooting days.
Well, it was one of the few episodes of Lost that was pretty much straight flashback.
It was
pretty
much.
It was basically just you and your story.
Yeah, it was an
amazing episode.
Thank you. No, it felt like a film.
Yeah.
For me and for Tucker Gates, who directed that episode. Tucker's a phenomenal director, and it was a gift in so many ways, but in the sense that we felt like, okay, well, you and I are just doing a little film here, that is connected obviously to a larger story, but we kind of are in our own world, in our own period. So let's shoot a film. It was kind of freeing.
So we are on season 3 in the podcast, but just to ask a little bit about the later development of your character. I mean, you talked about playing him like there's got to be a higher cause, a higher purpose, not knowing what it was, but trusting completely in it. And then we learn over time that while Richard had this beginning of this sort of magical relationship with Jacob, where he was blessed with agelessness, and Jacob gave him this job to do and gave him purpose, that it pretty much seems like for 140 years after that, he's acting on faith alone. I don't know that there's really any indication that he ever talks to Jacob again after that first time.
Absolutely, and faith, and in some ways, I think he definitely views it as a curse. Because
interesting.
Because he had to give up his love for her,
for Isabella.
For Isabella, and he was endowed with immortality, so it's a curse as well. He can never be reunited with her, and yet he'll be immortal. So it's a double-edged sword, in a sense.
Well, it's interesting. He asks for it.
He does ask for it.
Why do you think he asks for it?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know why he asked for it as well.
I was watching that scene and thinking about it and wondering, is he scared of death? Is he afraid of the devil? Do you think if he dies, he'd get to see his wife again? So it's a little,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really fun, and I don't know. I don't know why he asked for immortality in that moment. And right. So in a sense, foregoes seeing his wife. In a vision, it isn't until Hurley, facilitates that, but he doesn't know that's going to happen, that he ever gets reunited with her. But that's a really good question. I don't know. I don't know why. His fear for death might have been that much greater, more so than being reunited with her. I don't know, but he obviously learned over time that thing was a curse. His choice was a curse.
If you, Nestor Carbonell, could be granted immortality right now, would you take it?
That's a profound question.
I wasn't planning to ask that. It just came out.
No, it's only if my loved ones were granted it too. I don't think I would want it.
That's a good answer. I didn't extend it to your family. Yeah. I apologize.
No, it's it goes back to Lost, and that would be torture if I feel like I couldn't be with him again.
Yeah. Well, I think the curse thing is interesting because you see that play out in the last season where Richard goes into the Black Rock and lights the dynamite.
Right.
I feel like it's once his faith is sort of starting to crack, where he realizes Jacob is gone and he still doesn't know what the purpose was. I mean, I don't know if that's how you read it, but that's kind of how I read it.
Exactly. I think at that point it's like, what is the purpose? What was the purpose of all this? All of it gets muddied, right? All these choices you make, and what was the higher goal? What was, and I think all of us were cursed, with that. It's like, what did this all mean? We all had to trust in this higher purpose, but what was that higher purpose in the end? And I think that's where, questions of, I guess for some people, faith, and tragedy, and how do you reconcile all this stuff? So when people question their faith, I imagine. And certainly with Richard, he questioned his choices, and you're right, and his overall purpose, as he would tell everybody, he would tell Locke, he would tell Ben, talking about this higher purpose. I think for him, he questioned his own faith and certainly his own choices.
What do you think, either as an actor or as just a fan of the show? Were you convinced by the end that there was some greater cause or purpose that these characters aspired to, or was it all just events?
No, I do believe I do believe that there was some greater, higher purpose. I do believe that, and I mean, even the notion of the island being magnetic, and this notion that the characters who did leave the island, I believe was season 5. I'm sorry, it's been a few years.
That's okay.
You know, when Jack was saying we need to go
right,
back.
the Oceanic Six.
The Oceanic Six, yeah, exactly. We need to go back. I think there was something genuine about that island. You know, that was endowed with something magical and religious. You know, and had a higher purpose. I do believe that there was something there. There was a reason why they were drawn to it, and it wasn't something evil. You know, I think there was some higher purpose to the island and the properties of the island and what it could do. I mean, it was cursed as well, but I think it had plenty. You know, I think it was rooted in something powerful and religious and something good ultimately.
Can you define what that is?
I can't. I wish I could, because
okay.
I still don't have the answers.
I don't know that Damon or Carlton could quite define that either.
I don't know, but I think that's what was interesting about the show. It did raise more questions than answers, you know, and I think it was frustrating for some people. Sort of in the end,
yeah, for sure.
And I understand that, but for me, it's you know, faith. You know, it's faith. You know, and it's you know, if it's not necessarily provable. It's you know, and so. It isn't provable in that sense. So so it requires a leap,
right?
You know, and I think it asks questions of faith and the power of faith and a higher purpose. You know, and what is that higher purpose? You know, and what does that higher purpose look like?
Right, and it has something to do with life and death for sure, and the connections between them. And I think that's what the whole last season was about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to me, what was beautiful about that last season, and particularly that last episode, was this notion of soul groups. You know. Are our bodies, separated from our souls? You know, and do we travel in soul groups? You know, soul connections, which really was that. You know, for those who were confused by the ending, I know we're jumping ahead from season 3, okay. But you know, to that last scene, I get so many questions from fans about it, understandably so, about the ending. But what did that mean? You know, were they all dead? And you know, I know you've talked to Damon about it, and you know, from my talks with him and Carlton. No, when Jack died, you know, that last season, Desmond was recruiting everybody to go to that church. Yeah. And those flash sideways represented a purgatory of sorts, and specifically Jack's purgatories. And you know, so when they all came to that church, and Jack asked his father, you know, what are they all doing here? And he said, and what is this place? And he says, it's a place that knows no time. And he said, well, why are they there? Well, they're there to see you to higher ground. So essentially, those people were his soul group. That when they died at different times, you know, even though when we see them on screen, we remember them as we knew them, they would have died at different times. When they all died, and he died rather, you know, they were there to see him to higher ground, you know. And so they traveled, and so this notion of soul groups is a beautiful thing.
Maybe that's in Ram Dass's writing somewhere.
It could very well be.
I like actually the line that you attributed to Christian Shepherd there, a place with no time. The line was actually, this was a place you all made together. Oh. But I like the way that you put it.
Oh, I thought, that I misquoted.
No, it's an elegant misquote.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. Yeah. I've got to go back and rewatch it and rewrite it. No.
And any regrets on not being in the church at the end?
Listen, I talked to Damon and Carlton about that. They went back and forth on that.
Interesting. You
know, that they had many discussions about who was going to be in the church, and my character, you know, they sort of went back and forth. But I can see why I wasn't, you know, because my connection with Jack wasn't very strong at all. And really so Ben was outside, you know. So even though he was connected with Jack, obviously it was not a great relationship, you know. But with those who were inside, they had touched his life, and he had touched theirs in a meaningful way, and right. I didn't have that connection with Jack, so I understood why I wasn't there.
So we alluded to this earlier, but I think Nestor phrases really beautifully this concept of the soul group. So, you know, this is Jack's soul group. They all went and lived independent lives, or not. And when Jack ultimately died, they were already here, sort of waiting for him to, you know, to see him to higher ground, as they say. And I think that really does help me make sense of Charlie and Claire and some of the other people who, you know, Shannon is there, like other people who kind of maybe died before their time or didn't fully get to sort of live out their storylines or their love stories or their...
Right, Shannon and Sayid was even more short-lived than Charlie and Claire.
Right. And, you know, again, Nadia wasn't there. Shannon was. That was a choice that was made. Back in season 1, we interviewed Andrea Gabriel, who played Nadia, and she expressed some annoyance about that choice, which is funny. But I don't know. That helps me feel better about these sort of lives that were cut short, because sort of somewhere they lived out their full potential, even if it's just kind of in Jack's own personal purgatory or whatever.
I thought the idea that this was Jack's soul group specifically is really clarifying.
Me too.
It probably should be obvious when you watch it, because it's like Jack's dad is there and he's the one who, is the last one in and has to accept it. But I don't know. I guess I feel like when I watched it, I tried to avoid that interpretation in my own head because I didn't want this to be all about Jack.
Yeah.
In quite that way. Not that it is all about Jack, but I mean, Nestor made it sound like, he had talked with, like, Carlton about this,
right.
and that was how Carlton was explaining it.
Right, because they went back and forth about whether Richard should be there. And part of that explanation that Nestor gives here is, Richard and Jack weren't that close. Why would Richard be there to see Jack through to the afterlife? This isn't like a vigil for the island. It's Jack.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me, why are all of these other people part of Jack's soul group instead of, like, their own soul groups? Or, I don't know, it's... Well, I don't know that I have a problem with it. It's interesting.
Well, the way I conceive of this is that everybody would have their own soul group then. So when Kate died, all of, her mother might be there, and, all of these other people would be there. And when Shannon died, there were a bunch of different people there, and that's how I interpret it. I don't quite know the mechanics of how that works, but I do think everyone would have their own.
Yeah, I like that. I would have questions about the mechanics because, like, everyone in Jack's soul, quote-unquote soul group here has their own, like, revelation of remembering their own lives. So are they doing that in everyone's soul group that they're a part of?
Oh, you're right.
But that, that's not that's not a challenge that can't be overcome to the mechanics here. I just don't, don't know quite how it would work.
Right.
I like your interpretation.
Yeah.
I do have to tweak something that I said to Nestor, which is he referred to a line that in his head was that Christian Shepherd calls it a place beyond time. And I cut in and said, well, yeah, I think the line was that he said it's a place you all made together.
I think he says both.
Yeah, so I realized that as I was listening back to it, and the line that he must have been referring to is when Christian says to Jack, everyone dies sometime, some of them before you, some long after you. Mm-hmm. Jack asks, well, what are they all doing here now? And Christian says, there is no now here. Mm-hmm. So that's clearly what he's referring to as the... Right. And I love that in his mind that is the place beyond time line. That's just a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I picture that is like, we exist on this linear timeline, and this is like above the timeline. So, Jack in this place is sort of simultaneously living all of those previous moments and yet living none of them at all because he's like removed from the timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. Mechanics. Makes perfect sense.
Anyway.
We'll be back next week. We will be watching the season 3 finale Through the Looking Glass. It will be very exciting. It will be very sad.
We're going to do both parts 1 and 2 next week in the way that they originally aired. That means it might be a bit of a long episode because we'll have a lot to discuss. And we will have the final chapter of Sammy's interview with Nestor Carbonell next week.
Until then, find us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast. Also Twitter at The Hatch Podcast.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen. Our cover art is by Danny Roth.
And we will be back one more time next week.
Namaste.